It Was Almost Real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast, episode 74. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of It Was Almost Real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast. My name is Ken Zimmerman Jr., and this is the podcast dedicated to professional wrestling history from 1870 to 1930. And joined back in the studio this week, the one, the only, the irrepressible, the irreplaceable, Dangerous Dan Zimmerman has returned to the podcast.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for welcoming me back, Ken. That was a nice intro. Things are going good over here. You know, like I said, just getting better day by day.
Well, it's good to have you back on the podcast. So, before we start talking about the wrestling, I know that you and Jimmy probably watched the football game last night. What the heck happened between the Lions and the Commanders? Because I didn't watch the game because I like both teams. I never did like Washington until they got Jaden Daniels, but I do like him.
Yeah.
And Detroit was my pick to go to the Super Bowl this year, and I really like that team as a whole. But I could not have predicted the Commanders beating them, so tell me what I missed.
Well, I'll tell you what, you missed. You just missed a good game. I mean, both teams were, very, very offensive. There was not a lot of defense in the game. Both teams were on point on offense. It was just the Commanders were a little bit more. They were peaked at the right time. And, I thought Gibbs, Amon St. Brown, Jared Goff's got a good arm. I thought they were going to be, it'd be close because the Commanders barely won that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They won on a doink,
Yeah.
So, but if you would have told me they would have scored 41 points, I would have laughed at you and called you crazy.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I could not have. If you would have told me to guess 100 times who'd win that game, I would have said Detroit every time.
Yeah, I have said in the past, and it's always the team that peaks in the playoffs at the right time, but I actually thought that was Detroit. They looked really good those last few games, so I was surprised, but,
I just wonder if that loss to Buffalo got in their head.
Yeah, maybe.
Messing with them.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be rooting for my beloved Eagles today, and I'm hoping they're going to get back to the Super Bowl. If Philadelphia gets to the Super Bowl, I'll watch. If Washington gets to the Super Bowl, I'll watch. If the Los Angeles Rams get to the Super Bowl, there ain't no chance I'm going to watch that unless I'm positive the KC or the Bills are just going to crush them.
Yeah, and I think that's,
I guess I'm already putting.
I think that's a no-brainer. If the Bills or the Ravens, either one of them, whoever gets in, and they're going to squash LA. I mean, Philadelphia should make short work of LA today, but it all depends on who shows up.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, but I guess we'll find out when that time comes. And I guess I'm going to get in trouble with my daughter, because I've already kind of put Buffalo in the AFC Championship game, and, she ain't going to go for that.
Oh, man, well, that's great. I'm rooting for the Eagles. I wouldn't mind seeing the Eagles and Bills because then I wouldn't care who wins. I like both teams.
Yeah. I'd always pull for the Eagles first, but I would be happy with a Buffalo win. I'd be happy with KC being the first team to ever win 3 in a row. It's the home state team.
Yeah, I tell you what, KC. I knew KC would beat Houston, but I don't know if they're going to be able to beat the Ravens or the Bills, whoever wins today.
Yeah.
I'm a diehard Chiefs fan since 1986. I got all the Chiefs adornments hanging up in here, and I'm diehard. So.
Yeah. So I guess eventually we're going to have to get back to wrestling. So.
Let's go ahead and get to it.
The news broke this week that Vince McMahon settled with the SEC over how he termed it a couple of minor bookkeeping errors. Those minor bookkeeping errors misstated the company's profits by 8% for 1 year.
Yeah. And when you have a company that big, 8% is actually a good sizable chunk.
Yeah, it's a good chunk of change. So, I mean, the good thing is that Vince is not going to come back to wrestling.
Yeah.
He's done. And
well, when's Vince going to visit a Crossbar hotel?
I don't think he's going to. He's going to lose this lawsuit. If he's got a brain in his head, he will settle it because he doesn't want any more details from this lawsuit to come out and expose him more for all of his little peccadillos. And his son-in-law...
Well, I mean, they already exposed enough of...
They exposed enough to embarrass him, but I would almost guarantee you, most lawyers do not put all their cards on the table in the initial filing. There are probably more salacious details that Vince probably doesn't want to reach the light of day. So if he's got a brain in his head, he's going to take some of that money he made selling the TKO stock, and he'll settle that lawsuit. And then hope enough time passes that he can get this entertainment company off the ground. Because this is going to follow him for a long time. The things he's accused of doing... That's not just going to go away when this court case is settled.
Right, it's going to hang on for a while.
And the wrestling...
I'm just wondering if if they'll have enough evidence against him that he'll want to take a plea deal.
Well, I don't think they're going to charge him civilly or criminally. I think the criminal thing, that's what this SEC investigation was. And he made a settlement. There's no criminal charges going to be brought. And I don't think any of the state authorities are looking at him for anything.
Oh, wow.
So I don't think he's looking at the Crossbar Hotel. I think that he's going to pay a sizable settlement to Janelle Grant and probably a few other people that we haven't even heard anything about yet.
Right.
And he's going to hope that it blows over at some point. The thing that is probably disheartening is he's going to pay this money, which he's got more money than the federal government right now because of the TKO stock sale. It'll take a chunk out of him, but, for Vince, he probably won't think that much of it. And then, after enough time has passed, he's going to start trying to spin this as it isn't what we all think it is.
Right.
But,
maybe he'll just get him another prostitute and he can crap on her head.
Oh,
make
God.
Him feel better.
Good Lord. All right.
What?
Anyway. Oh, this show just took a horrendous turn out of nowhere.
Well, he's got to make himself feel better somehow, doesn't he?
Oh, well, I hope he would do something other than that.
Yes, I'm back, guys. Get used to it. All right, so...
So anyway, now that my train of thought has been completely derailed, I think I told you this last week. I have seen some of the AEW shows that they put up on Max, and I've watched the last couple weeks. I can't say other than the first show that I've just watched all the way through, but I've had it in the background while I was doing other things, or I actually watched certain things that caught my attention. And, I shared my thoughts on it. I don't think it's a horrible show, but I will say the things that I've seen that are bad are really, really bad. And so some of the things that have changed over time, so I watched some of the shows from 2019, and probably my favorite wrestler on those early shows, well, I have two, because I like Pac back then and now. That guy is an amazing talent in the ring as far as wrestling and putting on incredible displays in the ring.
Yeah.
But probably my favorite wrestler in 2019 was Hangman Adam Page. And probably my least favorite wrestler in 2024, 2025 is Hangman Adam Page. Because he went from this, tough cowboy wrestler to now he's just some kind of weird guy that is into weird things.
Oh, gotcha.
I think they totally lost it. Now, I thought Chris Jericho looked a little ridiculous in 2019, and I think he looks a lot ridiculous today. And he had a match with Dax Harwood on Collision a week ago that was horrible. And it was horrible because he just can't move anymore. He hides it a little bit by the posturing to the crowd and the hamming it up and stuff. But like he did a lion salt, and a lot of it is his age. I mean, he's in his early 50s. He's trying to do that lion salt, barely got over, and almost landed knees first on Dax Harwood's face.
Oh, Jesus.
Dax Harwood did a couple of those dragon screw leg maneuvers, and Jericho can't fall properly. He can't turn correctly in that dragon screw anymore, and he can't get over it properly, so he fell awkwardly both times. Dax Harwood had to project himself a couple times when Chris Jericho was pushing from the ground with his feet onto him. And then they completely screwed up the finish. So the finish was supposed to be Jericho. Let me say, I think this is supposed to be the finish based on what I was looking at. What I was looking at, I think Harwood was supposed to dive at Jericho with like a headbutt, and Jericho was going to grab the Ring of Honor championship belt and set it there and have Harwood hit his head and, knock himself out.
Right.
But they got the belt in the ring. The referee is not really reacting to that, which is odd in itself. And then Jericho is laying on the mat and reaches up to, like, poke the referee in the eye, which, why was that not a DQ? But he pokes him in the eye. But you could see his hand was a foot to 2 feet from the referee's face. Because where he was laying on the mat, he could not reach up and poke the referee in the eye. The announcers did their best to cover it up, and they're like, I think Jericho just poked him in the eye. Well, then Dax goes for, I believe it was a flying headbutt, and Jericho reaches over for the belt that he had pushed away from him for a second. So it was a little out of his reach. He grabbed it and went to pull it for Dax Harwood, and he let go of it, and it looked like he kind of punched Harwood in the face with his hand, but the belt's still laying over there. So they had to kind of improvise. He gets up, grabs the belt, hits him in the head, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, man.
And as I was telling you earlier, the one complaint I do have about AEW, they never just have a match, have a winner, and move on. There is always some kind of extracurricular punch-up afterwards, run-ins, and they had a match earlier in the show between Big Cass. Oh, I'm calling him by his old name. He's Big Bill now.
Yeah.
That was his name in WWE. He's Big Bill.
Oh,
and
okay.
The Rated R superstar Cope, who you and I know is Adam Copeland. They're calling him the Rated R superstar Cope.
That's weird.
That's stupid. He's been, when you're changing your name in your 50s, something's, a little off. But anyway, they had a good match, but there was, of course, a run-in afterwards with everybody involved. So Tony Khan banned everybody from the match. Well, 2 seconds after the match is over, here comes Big Bill, and the guy, I can never remember his name. He just scowls at the camera and yells occasionally. They come running out, and then here comes Rated R superstar Cope and Cash Wheeler, the other half of FTR. And then here comes the Death Riders. Moxley gets in there, and I think he did something to Adam Copeland. He did. It was Copeland because they were going to do the concerto on him, and all of a sudden Will Hobbs music plays.
Okay.
Because this was part of his 1 week push. He gets beat on the last pay-per-view. That's why there are definitely some things that AEW can improve. So he gets beat on the pay-per-view. Then he wins the Casino Gauntlet match for the title shot with Moxley. And Moxley and his group run from him 2 shows in a row. And it's like, oh, great, because Hobbs is somebody they should be pushing. Then Moxley beats him in the match, and they have on that show, everybody jumps him afterwards, too. And that's what I'm saying. I'd said on the last show when I was talking about it, it was like with the NWO. When the NWO came out and beat up everybody and spray painted NWO on them the first time, you were like, oh, these no good dastardly heels. I just can't wait till somebody gives them their comeuppance.
Right.
The second time in a row they do it, 2 weeks in a row, you're like, okay, where is the security? How stupid
Right.
are these people? Then the third week in a row that they do it, now you're starting to say, how stupid are these baby faces? Why would you keep
Right.
coming out there and getting your butt kicked, outnumbered 8-1?
Exactly.
And that's what they're starting to have happen with the Death Riders.
Um,
But that match with Jericho I was telling you about, people were groaning several times. And it was a pro Jericho crowd because they were in Atlanta. So I think these were probably fans that used to watch WCW. And he was great in
yeah.
97, 98, 99. And
Oh, yeah.
WCW, I was super excited when he came to WWE. But I mean, that was 25 years ago. And
Exactly.
there,
Exactly.
there were definitely no chance of you still got it.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised he hasn't lost his hair yet.
Yeah. That's about the only thing he hasn't lost. He is a little overweight right now. He probably losing weight would help him a little bit, but he doesn't need to be doing some of the things he's trying to do. And
Right.
they did go up for a superplex spot, and he fell off the top rope, down like 2 ropes, and then climbed back up and let him do the superplex to him.
Jesus.
Yeah. So, and a couple of those spots, the crowd was, the reaction was to kind of groan or go, oh. They didn't want to, just boo him, but it was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is going to go out tomorrow, and tomorrow is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So I actually wanted to talk about someone I recently discovered. So I've known about some of the earlier great African-American wrestlers, like the Black Panther, Jim Mitchell, Sailor Art Thomas.
Yeah.
But there is somebody that predates all of them who, as best I can tell, and the kid I discovered last year is from Missouri. But he is actually after this wrestler, too.
Oh, okay.
His name is escaping me. It'll come back to me at some point. But this is also somebody with Missouri roots, and it was a gentleman by the name of, he wrestled as Reginald Siki, but he was born in Kansas City on December 28th, 1899, as Reginald Berry.
Okay.
And so he wrestled as Reginald Siki. So Sweet Daddy Siki, who just recently died, he took his name from Reginald Siki.
Okay.
And Reginald Siki wrestled professionally. He boxed a little bit. And he made his professional debut in 1923 in Boston. But he wrestled a lot in the Midwest, Chicago, some in L.A., and eventually he would settle in L.A. And he was a little unusual, I found, because despite the fact that he was an African-American wrestler and there was so much racial prejudice going on at the time, he actually developed into a nationally known wrestling star. And he had AWA title matches with Henry DeGlane in 1931. He had wrestling matches with and beat Jim Browning and a lot of the other, because Jim Browning would eventually go on to win the world title.
Yeah.
But in Los Angeles in 1925, Siki beat Jim Browning in one of Lou Darrow's early Olympic auditorium shows in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I had read that there was a near riot. There was nothing reported like that in any of the newspapers, so I don't believe that happened, because that would have been reported on, and it wasn't. So I don't think that it generated the kind of heat. And he was not a heel. He was portrayed as a good guy. He was also portrayed as a foreign wrestler. So he was billed sometimes from Abyssinia, sometimes he was billed from Senegal. But he actually was from Kansas City. And
Harley Race territory.
Yeah. Oh, remind me. I wanted to talk to you about the Iron Claw.
Okay.
I found it unusual that he would have so many matches with some of the top stars. So he must have been pretty good to overcome.
Yeah, he was. I was gonna say, because back then weren't the African American wrestlers, weren't they more kind of I'm not gonna say a novelty because that's not the right word, but
An attraction. They were an attraction. They were an attraction. So they were like somebody like an Andre the Giant. So he changes his name to Kamal Abdurrahman in the 1940s, but he's still a pretty well-known, nationally known name wrestler, and he's wrestling for Lou Darrow's promotion, and then Johnny Doyle after Lou Darrow, and eventually I think he even wrestled for Cal Eaton. But in June of 1948, he's having a match with Vic Holbrook that goes to a draw, and he gets an injury. And he's 48 years old. The injury is bad enough that he can't wrestle. So his wife, who was a stay-at-home homemaker before this, has to go out and start working, and she finds work as a domestic servant working for Tony Martin, the singer in Los Angeles. On Christmas Eve, 1948, 4 days before Kamal Abdurrahman's 49th birthday, he's going to Tony Martin's house to pick up his wife on Christmas Eve, and she opens the door, and he says, "Hey, Mildred," and falls right at her feet. He had a massive heart attack and died right there in the foyer of Tony Martin's home.
Yeah.
And his death makes a lot of news in California, but it's not really widely reported anywhere else. So I think for the last 8 years or so of his career, he pretty much mostly homesteaded in California. So as I learn more about him, we'll talk more about him. I was going to talk about that 1925 match with Jim Browning, but pretty much all they said was he used a crotch hold to pin Jim Browning in 24 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And Browning's somebody I want to do a project on eventually, because he was from Southwest Missouri, and he was one of the guys who he was a good enough legitimate wrestler that when they were doing all those double crosses in the 30s, Mont had set up a double cross of Landis with Jumpin' Joel Savoldi, who was a football player, wasn't a legitimate wrestler. But they fixed the referee. But after they did that double cross, Mont's like, I can't leave the belt on Savoldi, because any legitimate wrestler, just like a Big Wayne Munn, they could take the title off of him. So I've got to get it back on a legitimate wrestler. So he had Browning defeat Savoldi for that title. Browning, though, had a very short career because he dies in 1936.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I want to do something about him. I call him Jim Browning, the world champion no one knows about.
Right, yeah.
So the review I wanted to do this week actually touches on this concept of having somebody who was a big football star, and you put the title on them, and then you have wrestlers you trust put them over.
Right.
Sonnenberg was a huge football star, and in fact, he won an NFL championship in the 1920s with, it was a Northeastern team. It doesn't even exist anymore. It was like the Rochester Steamroller or something like that. Not that important for our discussion about wrestling, but he was a huge star. So in 1930, they bring him in wrestling. Lewis and them teach him how to work a believable match, just like they did with Munn. He knew enough to be able to work a match. So, and to build Sonnenberg up, they would have him lose to legitimate guys. So there is a actual video out there of Sonnenberg wrestling Joe Stecker, and it's about 2 to 3 minutes long. Now the match itself was like 2 hours. And so you only get a few of the clips of it. But basically they show him defeating Stecker with a bunch of flying tackles. Now, if that had been a legitimate wrestling contest, Joe Stecker could have picked his teeth with him.
Right.
Sonnenberg was not a legitimate wrestler and was definitely not on the level of Joe Stecker. Stecker was on the level with Lewis and Mont and Stanislaus Zbyszko. There's no way Sonnenberg could have beat him.
Right.
But Joe put him over, made him look like $1 million. Sonnenberg found himself on the end of a double cross from Jim Londas in the 30s.
Oh, okay.
But not by Londas himself.
Yeah.
So Sonnenberg was not a big guy, even though he was the heavyweight champion. He was about 5'6" and 195 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And Londas had been challenging him to a match. Well, Sonnenberg would have lost to Londas in a legitimate contest because Londas, even though he wasn't on the level of a Pesic or a Stecker,
Yeah.
Londas did know how to shoot and to hook. He was a carnival strongman that learned catch wrestling from the carnival wrestlers. So he knew subs, he knew hooks, he knew how to hurt people, but he just wasn't on the level of Lewis and those guys. If he had tried to shoot with them, he'd have lost, and he knew it. He avoided Lewis like the plague for a long time. And but Londas was trying to get Sonnenberg in the ring. Well, there's no way that Sandow and them are going to let him in the ring with Sonnenberg, knowing how susceptible he would be. You know, they learned their lesson by putting Munn in the ring with Zbyszko.
Yeah.
So they just said absolutely not. Well, so what Londas did was he had one of the guys associated with him who was a middleweight wrestler confront Sonnenberg on the street. And he kind of had his way with Sonnenberg before they broke it up, which really embarrassed Sonnenberg and the promoters. So he had to drop the title to a legitimate wrestler pretty quickly, so as to, you know, not give everything away.
Yeah.
But Sonnenberg was a huge star, and he continued wrestling, and he was married to a Hollywood starlet for a while. But
was he?
yeah, not a happy union, and he was in the hospital. They thought he was going to die when she told him she was leaving him. He recovered. Yeah, he recovered.
Shoot.
Yeah, he recovers, and he continues wrestling, but he died at only 46 years of age. I think his was a massive heart attack too.
Yeah.
But they do have the 2 minutes of the match out there, and you can see one thing I like about it. It does show how Stecker used to attack his opponents. He was always trying to put that body scissors on him, and you see in this match, that's what he's doing with Sonnenberg. Now he's working with him, so he takes Sonnenberg's flying tackle, which was Sonnenberg's finisher. You could see he just runs into him like he's a football linebacker a couple times. It does give you kind of an idea of what the matches were like in the 1930s. The problem is we don't have, and the reason we don't have any footage of an entire match is probably people weren't going to be too excited to watch 2 hours. So that's why they always cut those films down. You know, they cut them down for newsreels and stuff like that. Make it more palatable for people.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is the review for this week. So my next episode I'm going to actually do with Caleb, because he's going to watch the Iron Claw. He doesn't know anything about World Class.
Oh, okay.
And so I watched that Friday night. As a movie, I thought it was really good. Historically, it's very inaccurate, particularly with their timeline. Their timeline is all over the place.
Oh, okay.
So they have Kevin starting before David, which was true, but Kevin started in 1976. David started in 77, and David was actually full-time before Kevin was. Kevin didn't become full-time until 78 or 79. David was full-time almost from the time that he started, and Harley endorsed him as a future NWA World Champion in 1978. The people that play the wrestlers, other than MJF, who played Lance Von Erich, not accurately, but he played Lance Von Erich, and I'm not blaming MJF for that. Obviously, it was the director's call on what they did.
Did they shed any light on that? If it was
No,
suicide, murder.
it definitely
whatever.
was. It definitely was not suicide.
Yeah.
So David, I don't think we'll ever know 100% what had happened, but Kevin had said that he had got an injury, and it was an injury to his stomach. Well, supposedly what killed him was involved with his intestine.
I gotcha.
But there were also stories that Bruiser Brody threw a lot of drugs away. We'll never really know what happened over there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they didn't shed any real light on it.
Okay.
I'll go a little bit more in depth with Caleb, and Caleb doesn't know anything about it, so it'll be,
Yeah, surprise.
yeah. But overall, my biggest complaints with it, which I'll go into again next week in much more detail, but my biggest complaints were some of the wrestlers. None of those guys can look like the wrestlers because the wrestlers didn't look like normal people back then.
Right.
But I thought Zac Efron did an amazing job as Kevin. He was
okay.
great. Kevin was bigger than Kerry. So there's the first problem I had with it.
Yeah.
So that'll be it for this week. The next episode will be me and Caleb reviewing Iron Claw, and then you and I will be back for the following episode, and I'm going to talk about a match. Well, it was a match that didn't happen, but severely impacted Joe Stecker's claim to the world title in early 1926. So that'll be the focus of our episode. We'll throw in a review there, of course. And so that's it for me. Would you like to say goodbye to everybody? Well, I'm not sure if Dan can get his phone off mute, so I will say goodbye for him, and I will say fly, Eagles, fly. Take care, everybody.